Throughout time, stories have been told in different ways. If you go back to, thousands of years ago, people were sitting around a fire telling stories, in oral traditions. And even in the last, century or so, the medium for telling stories has moved. It's all storytelling, but it's in a different medium, and people like the new toys. But again, you're still telling a story. You're identifying with a character or characters. You're getting from point A to point B. Something happens and something resolves. How do you do it in a different medium? When you're doing it in virtual reality, you got to be able to tell a story, but at the same time realize that people are going to be moving their head around and looking at stuff on this side and on this side, so it's a little different way to be able to do it. If you're talking about 3D, it's sort of like you take a look at a movie like Avatar. The way that they use 3D is really, really interesting. It's not just a toy. It reinforces the way they're telling stories. If you take a look at, let's say, Deepak's MFA thesis film, which is the first MFA thesis film in the RTF department that was done in 3D, it's amazing to look at, but it's only amazing to watch because the story is also great. The acting is great. The directing is really well done. And it's a compelling enough story to be able to watch it from beginning to end.
And action.
The difference between immersive media and virtual reality is pretty drastic, I think. VR, or virtual reality, is what I consider to be, and I think what a lot of people are slowly sort of molding the definition to be, is something that's navigable, that has interactivity beyond just looking around. Immersive media, on the other hand, even if it's stereoscopic 3D, if it's video, we sort of are in a fixed perspective. The camera can be moving, but we have no agency. We cannot decide where we want to go. All we can really do is decide where we want to look. But the main difference here is immersive media is more of the photographic stuff that's captured right now. And virtual reality is the stuff created that are literal virtual worlds.
I remember when we began the program, we were the third program in the world. There was one in Korea, one in Germany. But as native 3D productions fortune sort of waned over the last few years, we've been the only one. And what's interesting about that to me, and fascinating actually, is that it's prepared us to go into VR on a level that no one else has really been prepared for. It's all an attempt at immersion in a way, so we call it immersive media.
When you're thinking about how to put together an immersive story, it's really different than how to think about doing something you're going to write in text, or even a video or an audio story. So they're learning to think about stories in a different way.
I think as journalists, we're always looking for new ways to tell stories, and this is a new way to tell stories. Everything right now, when we tell people's stories, it sort of goes through the journalist, right? Like we relay quotes or we edit videos, and there's still, of course, some framing on our end with virtual reality, but this allows people, rather than to hear about someone else's experience, to experience someone else's experience, right? We can put audiences in the experience of someone else.
The most interesting part of what we're teaching here is not necessarily the equipment, it's the understanding as to how this technology allows us to tell the stories we want to tell differently, and sort of what comes with that in regards to the theory of how we put things together, how we conceptualize things, and how we deliver them to our intended audience.
We're creating the experience, so you are controlling what's in the experience. So you're making editorial choices here just like you would in editing a story, writing a story, doing a video. So we're saying this is the experience.
Now, you want people to be able to look at a 3D film or a virtual reality story told and not be overwhelmed by the medium. It ropes an audience in a way that's much more organic, as opposed to going, look at this. You want to be able to look at this, but look at this because of the story, because of the medium being able to tell the story in a different way that's compelling to that audience.
Users like to be able to, and audiences like to be able to engage with media, right? They like to be able to engage with stories, and we want them to, both from a financial and advertising perspective, but also because we want them to know as much as they can about the stories we're telling. So engagement is good. I think everyone can sort of agree on that. So immersive or virtual reality storytelling is another way that people can engage because they're in it, and they can make choices. But I think another way that it's engaging is that it has the potential, at least in a lot of the stories that we've seen it used for, is to create such a feeling of an emotional connection between the person who's sort of immersed in this environment and whatever the subjects of the virtual reality piece are, because you're there. It is, I was sort of a little skeptical about it, I think, before I tried it myself, like, oh, whatever, this headset, like, how can it make such an impact? But you put it on, man, and you're in a refugee camp in Syria, and it is a flood of emotional connection to this story. And I think that, as journalists, that's sort of something always that we want, right? We want our audiences to feel a connection to the story that we're telling. And I think this is a particularly powerful way to engage that connective feeling between audiences and the subjects of our stories.
I think for a university, innovation is really what it's about at its best. Now, to prepare students for that, you have to build a foundation of understanding of, tradition, and the traditions of storytelling are a part of what anybody is coming to film school to do. But on the other hand, once you have technologies available, then if you do have that foundation, you're sort of prepared to create your own space with it.
A viewer or a user of a 360 experience or piece is inherently almost, the director, the editor, and the cinematographer rolled into one. You can prompt them as much as you want, but at the end of the day, they have complete control. They decide where they're looking, they decide how long they're looking in said spot, and sort of, in a way, they are creating the flow of the experience.
Going into a new realm with some of this immersive media, and it's sort of fresh to everybody. There aren't too many experts anywhere about this stuff.